Welcome to the second meeting of the Standards, Procedures and Public Appointments Committee in 2013. Could I remind members to turn off mobile phones and Blackberries. Now, we have received apologies from Brian Adam MSP and Helen Eadie MSP, and we'll move on to agenda item 1, which is declaration of interests, and I would welcome Mark Griffin to the meeting this morning and ask Mark to declare any relevant interests.
Nothing to declare, and that isn't in my register of interest, apart from the fact that I'm a member of the Public Audit Committee relating to one of the committee rule changes. Okay, thank you very much, Mark. If we can move on now to agenda item 2, decision on taking business in private. We're going to decide whether item 5, which is a discussion on the committee's approach to our inquiry into local motions, and item 6, which is a discussion on our approach to possible rule changes on committee substitutes, should be taken in private. Do members agree to take items 5 and 6 in private? Yes, thank you. Agenda item 3. This next item is also for the committee to agree to take the following items in private at future meetings. The first one is a paper on possible rule changes for hybrid bills. The second one is a discussion paper on our approach to our review of the parliamentary reform. And the third one is a paper on our inquiry into post-legislative scrutiny. So would members agree to take these 3 items in private at future meetings? Yes, thank you. If we can now move on to agenda item 4, Scottish Law Commission bills. You have the paper in front of you today, and we need to take a view on a number of issues in that paper. As you'll know, we heard evidence at our last committee meeting from the conveners of the Subordinate Legislation and the Justice Committees on the working group report about implementing Scottish Law Commission bills. Now, although the conveners broadly agreed with the report, there were some issues which were raised on which we may wish to take a view before considering the draft standing orders. And the first one is the mechanism for referring bills. That's paragraphs 2 to 5 on the paper, the first page of the paper there. So could I ask members what they feel about the option 1 and option 2, where the 2 conveners had slightly different views? Do members have any comments on this? Fiona?
I took this back to first principles convener and thought it was interesting that not just the 2 conveners that gave us evidence, that of all the committees that submitted written evidence, it was absolutely evenly split. And in taking it back to first principles, I certainly prefer option 1, because I think if we introduce a level where the Business Bureau have the criteria that we are going to suggest, and then the committees get to almost make the Business Bureau's decision for them, if it's referred to them first. I also think that with the stage 1, 2, 3 that a bill goes through, the Bureau reflects upon the criteria, sends it to subordinate legislation if appropriate, and at stage 1, as in any bill, a subject committee can then make their views known at that point. I think if we said that it goes to the subject committee first, then we're just introducing an extra step that is not necessary.
Any other views on this?
I agree.
John, you agree? Yes.
Yeah, I would, through you convener, I would tend to agree also with the point that Fiona's making.
Okay, am I getting the sense that members are content to go with option 1?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. If we can move on to the second point, which is criteria for referral, you'll see in paragraph 6 and 7 of the paper. Do members have any comments in relation to the criteria for referral? I noticed that Nigel Dawn, when he was before us, made the point that standing orders wouldn't prevent the Subordinate Legislation Committee from seeking a view, although there's no obligation to respond. Sorry? Sorry, John.
I think we're still on this issue.
Oh, is that a different one? Oh, sorry, I've just jumped onto another item. My apologies, yes.
The criteria for referral on paragraphs 6 and 7 is what we're looking at. Do we wish to bear the issue in mind is what the option is, and considering there are standing orders, or do we want, or, I mean, basically, are we happy with that criteria for referral, or do we want to adjust it in any way? So we'll just keep it in mind, bear it in mind. Okay, thank you. Right, now, sorry, on to the next item, which is input from subject committees. Nigel Donn, as I said, felt that the standing orders wouldn't prevent the Subordinate Legislation Committee from seeking a view, but there's no obligation on subject committees to respond to the Subordinate Legislation Committee. And it strikes me that it's a bit pointless unless some kind of deadline was maybe set to say that if the subject committee didn't respond within a set time period, that the subordinate legislation would take it that they were content. You couldn't just leave it hanging out there. So what do members feel about this?
Should be a timescale put on it.
Yeah, so if we set a timescale, how long do you feel would be appropriate in terms of giving a subject committee time to respond to the sub-ledge committee? Would a month be reasonable?
Depends. Sorry, Margaret. It depends again when that relevant committee meets, or if there is a break. A month may be too short.
Maybe
2 months.
excluding any recesses?
Yeah.
Yes.
A month excluding any recesses?
Yeah.
Because I don't think it would be right for us to demand that a subject committee give a response, but if we put a deadline, and the presumption would be if they didn't reply within that deadline, they're accepting what the sub-ledge is actually saying.
Convener a month excluding
recesses. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. That now takes us to the support issues. That's paragraphs 11 running through to 12. What do members feel about this particular issue in terms of bills coming forward and the ability of the non-governmental bills unit, etc., to actually support members and so on in relation to this? Do we have any views, Richard?
I really don't see the point, the fact of the Scottish Government. If the Scottish Government are presenting a bill, they will support it themselves. If a committee is presenting a bill, that will be resourced somehow. And if a member is putting forward a bill, I'm sure the member will be able to do that on their own, if required. But I don't see the point that these won't be resourced. I think they will. Where I can't specify at this moment in time, but I think they will be resourced.
Any other views on this? Fiona?
I went to paragraph 12, and again, being the pedant that I am, absolutely agree. It's not for standing orders to discuss resourcing. Standing orders already, there already is a procedure for if a bill is introduced, as Richard Lyle has said, it is resourced as per the way the bill is introduced. It's not something for us to write up in standing orders, I don't think.
Any other views on this? Okay, I think you're probably right. I mean, I think the practicality of issues will actually exercise control anyway. If bills are coming forward, if there isn't resource, then they won't come forward, and if there is, they will. And so I think it will maybe take care of itself. So basically, we don't really want to come down hard and fast in this, and I presume you don't want to seek the view of the government on it, because if you don't feel it's an issue and it shouldn't be dealt with by standing orders, there's no point in looking for any further information on it. So we'll just leave that as it is. Okay? Righto. And if we can now move on to the impact of proposed procedures. That's paragraphs 13, 14, 15 and 16. Do we have any comments on this? And do you I mean, do you feel that we need to review this at some stage, you know, in the future? Fiona?
You know me, I go through every line. Absolutely, we need to review anything new you bring in should have a review process in it. I was just worried about the later in the session and wondered if we should look at it in terms of, yes, a timescale, but also an X number of bills. Because if we get to later in the session and nothing's gone through, is there anything to review? But then when I thought about that, I thought, no, you have to say that, because if nothing's gone through, is it because the criteria are too strict? So I think it has to be a timescale, but plus an option of after X number of bills, perhaps. And we'll have seen how they've worked through. So possibly something like, and I'll just throw this in, I've written after X bills, maybe after 3 bills or 18 months we review.
Whichever comes first.
Does that make sense?
What do members feel about that suggestion? Yeah. Would you be happy with 3 bills in 18 months as a suggestion? That allows us to deal with the situation that if no bills come through, then obviously what we've set up isn't working, because the whole purpose is to allow some bills to come through. So 18 months would be a reasonable time. If nothing has happened in that time, I think we would need to look again at the criteria and so on. Okay, that's fine, we'll do that. In terms of looking, you know, reviewing things, let's presume that 1 or 2 bills do come through over the next 12 months or so. There are obviously going to be a lot of other Law Commission bills still sitting there. Would you want to pick up on the review in due course that issue? You know, what should be done about those bills that this system isn't picking up? Should we look at that to see if there's any other way that we could maybe suggest that would help more bills coming through in some other way? Would that be something you would want to consider for the work programme in due course? Yeah? Yeah, happy with that? Okay, right, we'll do that as well. Righto. And that brings us on to the next steps. Now, basically what we're looking at here is on how we should consult on the draft standing orders. Do you want to have a look at the draft standing orders here first before we consult others? Or would you be content for the draft standing orders to be put together by the clerks, with myself having a look at them and putting them out for consultation, and we could then look at responses by the next meeting at the end of February? There's pros and cons for both approaches. If you put them out just now, you're getting the benefit of other people's thoughts. On the other hand, if we look at them first, we could tailor them and deal with any points we weren't keen on before putting them out. But that would mean a delay of about a month before we can look at them ourselves. So what would members prefer? Would you prefer putting them out and getting responses, or do you want to have a look at them first? Sorry, John, and then...
I think probably the most efficient use of our time would be getting the drafts out to the draft orders out to the conveners, and then we reflect on the drafts and the views that have been expressed, and then taking it forward from there, rather than adding in an extra stage of us looking at it first.
Mm-hmm. What do other members? Margaret, did you happy with that? Fiona? Yeah. Okay, we'll do it like that. That's fine. Thank you very much. Now we're also asked to agree to consider the draft report and draft rule changes in private at a future meeting. So do you agree to look at the next stage of this in private? Fiona?
Can I just ask one thing that's just suddenly dawned on me? Somewhere in the report it says, should the subordinate legislation have its name changed?
Some of the responses from other committees. I think we could probably pick that up at a future meeting as well. Because I think there is some merit in considering that. So we'll do it at a future meeting. Okay, thank you very much. Now that ends the public part of this meeting, so I'll need to ask the public and others please to leave before we go into private session.